Lokabhaya Charana Sedu Dekhiya Ganga Sugana Simana Paya Tulasi Dekhi Juraya Pana Madhavato Shani Jani Gora Priya Saka Sebane Jivana Sarthakamani Bhakti Vino Krishna Bhajane Anukula Payaja Pratideva se Parama Sukhe Svikara Karo Yeta Suddha Bhakata Charana Renu Bhajana Anukula Bhakata Seva Parama Siddhi Premalati Karomula Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Dust from the lotus feet of pure devotees is conducive to the devotional service, while service to the Vaishnavas is itself the supreme perfection and the root of the tender creeper of divine love. I observe with great care the holidays like Ekadasi and Janmashtami, for they are the mother of devotion. As my dwelling place, I choose with the greatest of reverence and love the transcendental abode of Sri Krishna. All those places where my Lord Gaur Sundar traveled for pastimes, I will visit in the company of loving devotees. My mind always begs for the opportunity to hear the music of the mridanga. Upon hearing the kind of kirtan ordained by Lord Gaurachandra, my heart dances in ecstasy. By beholding the deity forms of the divine couple, Sri Sri Radha Krishna, I feel the greatest joy. By honoring the Lord's prasad, I conquer over all worldly illusions. Goloka Vrindavan appears in my home whenever I see the worship and service of Lord Hari going on there. Upon seeing the Ganges, which is a river of nectar emanating from the lotus feet of the Lord, my happiness knows no bounds. The sight of the holy Tulasi tree soothes my soul, for I know she gives pleasure to Lord Krishna. By honoring Sak, a dear favorite of Lord Chaitanya, I consider life worthwhile. Whatever Bhaktivinoda obtains that is conducive to the service of Sri Krishna, he accepts every day with the greatest of joy. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur ki jai. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jasodanandana Vraja Janaranjana. Jasodanandana Vraja Janaranjana. Jamunatira Vanachari. Jamunatira Vanachari. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Jaya Gora Nitai, Jaya Gora Nitai, Gora Nitai, Jaya Gora Nitai. Jaya Radha Madan Mohan, Radha Madan Mohan, Radhe. Jaya Jagannath, Jaya Jagannath, Jaya Baladeva, Jaya Subhadra. Jagannatha Swami Nayana Patagami, Nayana Patagami, Bhavatu me. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jayam Vishubhat Paramamsa Prabhupada Ashottara Sata Sri Srimad Ismangdes Esi Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Jayam Vishubhat Paramamsa Prabhupada Ashottara Sata Sri Srimad Ismangdes Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnavana Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Sikho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shyama Kunda Radha Kundgiri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Mayapur Navadvip Dham Ki Jai Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai Gangamai Ki Jai Yamunamai Ki Jai Srimati Tulasi Devi Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Sri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai Sri Sri Radha Madan Mohan Ki Jai Sri Sri Gonitai Ki Jai Sri Sri Jagannath Subhadra Baladev Ki Jai Gaura Premanandi. All glory is to the Asama all glory is to the Asama all glory is to the Asama all glory is to Sri Guru Sri Gauranga, all glory is to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Today we are reading from Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita. This is the volume number 2, yes. Volume 2, entitled Planting the Seed of devotional service that Prabhupada is giving. And the chapter is entitled Beyond the Lower East Side. Srila Prabhupada is reading from Chaitanya Charitamrita in the morning, and all the followers are there in the room. New York City. So Srila Prabhupada speaks from Chaitanya Charitamrita. He narrates the uh, pastime of Sanatan Goswami going to Varanasi, where he will meet Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Sanatan took the 7 gold coins from his servant and gave them to the hotel keeper. "You have 8 coins," the astrologer said. And Sanatan went back and found that his servant was retaining another gold coin. "Why do you carry this death knell on the road?" Sanatan asked. "You are too attached to money." And he took the gold piece from his servant and told him to return home. Sanatan then brought the gold coin to the hotel keeper. But the hotel keeper, who admitted that he had intended to kill Sanatan for his money, now said, "You are a good man, and you may keep your money." But Sanatan refused. Then the hotel keeper provided Sanatan with 4 assistants. They helped Sanatan through the jungle and then left him alone. Free from his nuisance servant and from the dacoits, Sanatan felt liberated as he passed along the road alone. Soon he came upon his brother-in-law, who was traveling along the same road. His brother-in-law was a wealthy man carrying a great deal of money to buy horses. "Please stay with me at least for a few days," Sanatan's brother-in-law said. "It's really bad how you look." The brother-in-law knew that Sanatan was going through spiritual life, but he requested that he improve his dress by accepting a valuable blanket from him. Sanatan took the blanket and continued on his way. At last, Sanatan reached Benares, and he went straight to the home of Chandrasekhar, where Lord Chaitanya was staying, and waited outside the door. Lord Chaitanya knew Sanatan had arrived, and he requested Chandrasekhar to go to the door and ask the devotee who was waiting there to come in. Chandrasekhar went out, but saw only the wretched-looking Sanatan, whom he took to be a half-man Mohammedan fakir. Chandrasekhar returned to Lord Chaitanya and explained that there was no devotee outside. "Was there anyone at all?" the Lord asked. "Yes," Chandrasekhar said, "some wretched fakir." Then Lord Chaitanya went to the door and embraced Sanatan. The Lord cried tears of ecstasy, for he had at last found a devotee whom he knew was worthy to receive his entire teachings. And Sanatan cried tears of joy that his life's ambition was being fulfilled. But because he was dirty from his traveling and not worthy, he asked the Lord not to touch him. The Lord replied, "It is I who benefit from touching you. Whoever touches a true devotee is blessed." Prabhupada closed the book, ending another morning session. One of Prabhupada's main concerns was to finish and publish as soon as possible his translation and commentary of Bhagavad Gita. And one day, something happened that enabled him to increase his work on the manuscript. Unexpectedly, a boy named Neil arrived. He was a student from Antioch College on a special work-study program, and he had the school's approval to work 1 term within the ashram of Swami Bhaktivedanta, which he had heard about through the newspapers. Neil mentioned that he was a good typist, if that could be of any help to the Swami. Prabhupada considered this to be Krishna's blessing. Immediately, he rented a dictaphone and began dictating tapes. Hayagriva donated his electric typewriter, and Neil set up his work area in Swamiji's front room and began typing 8 hours a day. This inspired Prabhupada and obliged him to produce more. He worked quickly, sometimes day and night, on his Bhagavad Gita as it is. He had founded Iskcon 5 months ago, yet in his classes he was still reading the Bhagavad Gita translation of Dr. Hare Krishna. But when Bhagavad Gita as it is would at last be published, he told his disciples, it would be a major importance for the Krishna consciousness movement. At last, there would be a bona fide edition of the Gita. Whatever Swamiji said or did, his disciples wanted to hear about it. Gradually, they had increased their faith and devotion to Swamiji, whom they accepted as God's representative, and they took his actions and words to be absolute. After one of the disciples had been alone with him, the others would gather around to find out every detail of what had happened. It was Krishna consciousness. Jadurani was especially guileless in relating what Swamiji had said or done. One day, Prabhupada stepped on the tack that Jadurani had dropped on the floor, and although she knew it was a serious offense to her spiritual master, the major importance of the event seemed to be how Prabhupada had displayed his transcendental consciousness. He silently and emotionlessly reached down and pulled the tack from his foot without so much as a cry. And once, when she was fixing a painting over his head behind the desk, she had accidentally stepped on his sitting mat. Is that an offense? She had asked, and Swamiji had replied, no. For service, you could even stand on my head. Sometimes Brahmananda would say that Swamiji had told him something very intimate about Krishna consciousness in private. But when he would tell what Swamiji had said, someone else would recall that the same thing was in Srimad Bhagavatam. Prabhupada had said that the spiritual master is present in his instructions and that he had tried to put everything into those 3 volumes of the Bhagavatam, and the devotees were finding this to be true. There were no secrets in Swamiji's family of devotees. Everyone knew that Umapati had left for a few days, disappointed with the Swami's severe criticism of the Buddhists, but had come back, and in a heavy, sincere exchange with Prabhupada, he had decided to take to Krishna consciousness again. And everyone knew that Satswarup had resigned from his job, and that when he went to tell Swamiji about it, Swamiji had told him that he could not quit, but should go on earning money for Krishna and donating it to the society, and that would be his best service. And everyone knew that Swamiji wanted Gargamuni to cut his hair. Swamiji called it Gargamuni's Shakespearean locks, but that he would not do so. The year ended, and Prabhupada was still working on his manuscript of Bhagavad Gita, still lecturing in the mornings from Chaitanya Charitamrita, and Monday, Wednesday, and Friday evenings from Bhagavad Gita, and still talking of going to San Francisco. Then New Year's Eve came, and the devotees suggested that since this was a holiday when people go out to celebrate, maybe they should hold a Krishna conscious festival. Rupanuga says, so we had a big feast, and a lot of people came, although it was not as crowded as the Sunday feast. We were all taking prasadam, and Swamiji was sitting up on his dais, and he was also taking prasadam. He was demanding that we eat lots of prasadam. And then he was saying, chant, chant. So we were eating and chanting Hare Krishna between bites. And he was insisting on more and more prasadam. I was amazed. He stayed with us and kept insisting that we eat so much. He stayed until around 11 o'clock, and then he became drowsy, and the party was over. End of quote. Morning after morning, the story of Sanatana Goswami unfolded from the pages of Swamiji's big book, which only he could read and explain. The book is in Bengali. It is from the Gaudiya Math edition. Prabhupada was reading and translating from Bengali into English. Lord Chaitanya told Sanatana that he should be very grateful that Krishna had been merciful to him, to which Sanatana replied, "You say that Krishna is very merciful, but I do not know who Krishna is. You have saved me." Lord Chaitanya had many devotees in Benares, and he sent Sanatana to the home of one of his friends, where he could get something to eat, take a bath, shave, and dress in new clothing. Sanatana, however, refused the new clothing, and he also refused to become dependent on one place for his meals. Now that he had entered the renounce order, he preferred to go begging his meals at a different place each day. When Lord Chaitanya saw all this, he was pleased. But Sanatana sensed that his valuable blanket did not please the Lord, so he traded the new blanket for an old one. This pleased Lord Chaitanya, who said, "Now you are completely renounced. Your last attachment is gone by the mercy of Krishna." Sanatana submitted himself at the lotus feet of Lord Chaitanya and said, "I have wasted my time in sense gratification. I am low-born and I have low association. I have no qualification for spiritual life. I do not even know what is actually beneficial for me. People say that I am learned, but I am a fool, number one, because although people say I am learned, and although I accept it, still I do not know who am I." Sanatana presented himself as a blank slate, and he inquired from the Lord, "Who am I? Why am I in this material world? Why am I suffering?" Prabhupada emphasized that this was the perfect way for a disciple to accept a spiritual master. After narrating the story of Sanatana's joining Lord Chaitanya, Prabhupada began lecturing on the Lord's teaching to Sanatana. Lord Chaitanya first explained that the living being is not the material body, but an eternal living soul within the body. Then, for 2 months, Lord Chaitanya instructed Sanatana, revealing to him the deepest and most sublime philosophical truths of Vedic wisdom. He enlightened Sanatana regarding the soul and its relationship with Krishna, the nature of the material and spiritual worlds, the characteristics of a fully realized soul, and the transcendental nature of Lord Krishna and his unlimited forms, expansions, incarnations, and divine pastimes. He explained the superiority of the path of Bhakti Yoga over the path of philosophical speculation and yogic mysticism. And he revealed to Sanatana the esoteric knowledge of spiritual ecstasy experienced by those souls who have achieved pure love for Krishna. These teachings of the Lord were like an ocean that overflooded the mind of Sanatana Goswami with its sweetness and grandeur. When Lord Chaitanya had finished instructing Sanatana, he gave Sanatana the benediction that all those sublime teachings would be fully manifested within his heart, thus enabling him to compose transcendental literature. For 2 months, Lord Chaitanya had instructed Sanatana Goswami, and for 2 months, starting in mid-November of 1966, Srila Prabhupada narrated in over 50 lectures the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita's account of those teachings. Although each of his talks covered the subject matter of the verses, his lectures were never limited to his subject, nor were they prepared talks. Sometimes, during the evening gatherings in his room, Swamiji would ask whether Mukunda was ready on the West Coast. For months, Prabhupada's going to the West Coast had been one of the number of alternatives. But then, during the first week of the new year, a letter arrived from Mukunda. He had rented a storefront in the heart of the Hyde-Ashbury district on Frederick Street. "We are busy converting it into a temple now," he wrote, and Prabhupada announced, "I shall go immediately." Mukunda had told of a gathering of the tribes in San Francisco's Hyde-Ashbury. Thousands of hippies were migrating from all over the country to the very neighborhood where Mukunda had rented the storefront. It was a youth renaissance, much bigger than what was going on in New York City. In a scheme to raise funds for the new temple, Mukunda was planning a mantra rock dance, and famous rock bands were going to appear, and Swami Bhaktivedanta and the chanting of Hare Krishna were to be the center of attraction. Although in his letter Mukunda had enclosed a plane ticket, some of Swamiji's followers refused to accept that Swamiji would use it. Those who knew they could not leave New York began to criticize the idea of Swamiji's going to San Francisco. They didn't think that people out on the West Coast could take care of Swamiji properly. Swamiji appearing with rock musicians, those people out there didn't seem to have the proper respect. Anyway, there was no suitable temple there. There was no printing press, no Back to Godhead magazine. Why should Swamiji leave New York to attend a function like that with strangers in California? How could he leave them behind in New York? How could their spiritual life continue without him? Timidly, one or two dissenters indirectly expressed some of these feelings to Prabhupada, as if almost wishing to admonish him for thinking of leaving them, and even hinting that things would not go well either in San Francisco or New York if he departed. But they found Prabhupada quite confident and determined. He did not belong to New York. He belonged to Krishna, and he had to go wherever Krishna desired him to preach. Prabhupada showed a spirit of complete detachment, eager to travel and expand the chanting of Hare Krishna. Brahmananda says, "But we were shocked that he was going to leave. I never thought that Krishna consciousness could go beyond the Lower East Side. What to speak of New York City? I thought that this was it, and it would stay here eternally." End of quote. In the last days of the second week of January, final plane reservations were made, and the devotees began packing Swamiji's manuscripts away in trunks. Ranchor, a new devotee recruited from Tompkins Square Park, had collected enough money for a plane ticket, and the devotees decided that he should accompany Prabhupada as his personal assistant. Prabhupada explained that he would only be gone a few weeks, and that he wanted all the programs to go on in his absence. He waited in his room while the boys arranged for a car to take him to the airport. The day was gray and cold, and steam hissed in the radiators. He would take only a suitcase, mostly clothes and some books. He checked the closet to see that his manuscripts were in order. Kirtanananda would take care of his things in his apartment. He sat down at his desk where, for more than 6 months, he had sat so many times, working for hours at the typewriter, preparing his Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, and where he had sat talking to so many guests and to his followers. But today, he would not be talking with friends or typing a manuscript, but waiting at last a few minutes alone before his departure. This was his second winter in New York. He had launched a movement of Krishna consciousness. A few sincere boys and girls had joined. They were already well known on the Lower East Side, many notices in the newspapers, and it was only the beginning. He had left Vrindavan for this. At first, he had not been certain whether he would stay in America more than 2 months. In Butler, he had presented his books. But then in New York, he had seen how Dr. Mishra had developed things, and the Mayavadis had a big building. They were taking money and not even delivering the real message of the Gita. But the American people were looking. It had been a difficult year. His godbrothers hadn't been interested in helping, although this is what their Guru Maharaj, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, wanted, and what Lord Chaitanya wanted. Because Lord Chaitanya wanted it, his blessings would come, and it would happen. This was a nice place, 26 2nd Avenue. He had started here. The boys would keep it up. Some of them were donating their salaries. It was a start. Prabhupada looked at his watch. He put on his tweed winter coat and his hat and shoes, put his right hand in his bead bag, and continued chanting. He walked out of the apartment, down the stairs, and through the courtyard, which was now frozen and still, its trees starkly bare, without a single leaf remaining. And he left the storefront behind. He left, even while Brahmananda, Rupanuga, and Swaswarupa were at their office jobs. There was not even a farewell scene or farewell address. Is it the end of the book? Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Are there any questions or comments? So at the appendix, there's a prayer to the lotus feet of Krishna. And the prayer Markine Bhagavad Dharma. Baro Kripa Koile Krishna Adamere Pati. Baro Kripa Koile Krishna Adamere Pati. Kila Giya Mileheta Koro Ebe Gati. Kila Giya Nileheta Koro Ebe Gati. Ache Kichu Karjo Taba Ei Anumane Nache Kichu Kajatabo Ei Anumane Nahe Keno Anibe Ei Ugrastane Rajastamo Gunera Sabayachana Vasudeva Kataruchi Nahe Se Prasanna Tabe Jadi Tabo Kripa Hoi Ahai Tuki Sakari Sambhava Hoi Tumi Se Kautuki কিভাবে বুঝালে তারা বুঝে সেই রস এত কৃপা কর প্রভু করে নিজ বাসা তোমার ইচ্ছায় সব হয় মায়া বাস তোমার ইচ্ছায় নাশ মায়ার পরাশা তব ইচ্ছা হয় যদি তাদের উদ্ধার বুঝবি নিশ্চয় তবে কথা সে তোমার ভগবতের কথা সে তব অবতার ধীর হইয়া শুনে যদি কানে বারবার শৃण्वतां सकथा कृष्णः पुण्यश्रवणकीर्तनः विदन्तस्तु ह्यभद्राणि विदुनोति सुहृत्सतां नष्टप्रायेषु भद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवत्युत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी तदा रजस्तमो भावा कामरोभादयश्च ये चेतयितैरनाभिद्धं सित्वं सत्त्वे प्रसीदति एवं प्रसन्नमनसो भगवद्भक्तियोगतः भगवत्तत्त्वविज्ञानं मुक्तसङ्गस्य जायते भिद्यते हृदयग्रन्थिश्छिद्यन्ते सर्वसंशयाः Chiyante cha sakarmani drishta eva atmanisvare. Translation of this Markine Bhagavad Dharma. My dear Lord Krishna, you are so kind upon this useless soul, but I do not know why you have brought me here. Now you can do whatever you like with me. But I guess you have some business here. Otherwise, why would you bring me to this terrible place? Most of the population here is covered by the material modes of ignorance and passion. Absorbed in material life, they think themselves very happy and satisfied, and therefore they have no taste for the transcendental message of Vasudeva. I do not know how they will be able to understand it. But I know your causeless mercy can make everything possible, because you are the most expert mystic. How will they understand the mellows of devotional service? Oh Lord, I'm simply praying for your mercy so that I will be able to convince them about your message. All living entities have come under the control of the illusory energy by your will. And therefore, if you like, by your will, they can also be released from the clutches of illusion. I wish that you may deliver them. Therefore, if you so desire their deliverance, then only will they be able to understand your message. The words of Srimad Bhagavatam are your incarnation, and if a sober person repeatedly receives it with submissive oral reception, then he will be able to understand your message. So I think we can end here for today's morning class. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita ki jai.